So this is the month of magic, September. We've decided to dedicate this month to magic. And we're not talking magic as in card tricks and sawing a lady in half. We're, of course, talking about the magic of inner transformation. And this morning before the sit, I made reference to a figure called Padmasambhava, who we have a rupa or an image of him on the shrine at the moment. And I also talked about Milarepa. And Milarepa is the person we're going to be looking at today, and particularly we're going to go through one of his songs and one of his particular stories in his life. That's very important. This is 2 parts. This is the first part of 2 parts. This week is meeting your demons, and next week is taming your demons. Next week we're looking at another figure, an Indian figure, a person called Atisha, and we're looking at a particular teaching that comes from Atisha, which is hard to say. Teaching from Atisha. So there is a subtitle to today's presentation, and that subtitle is The Work of a Dharma Magician. The Work of a Dharma Magician. And these are the 3 questions we're going to be looking at, and I would encourage you to have some time reflecting on it. I don't know if you can see them there. First question is, what do we find when we enter the cave of the mind? What choices do we make there? Meaning when we're in that cave of the mind. And what have been the fruits of those choices? Now, I don't have a lot of time to give you a full potted history of Milarepa. In fact, I recommend, if you've been exposed or had access to free Buddhist audio, there is an order member there called Dhammadina. Well, she has recordings there. She doesn't actually live on the internet. But although she's often on the internet, so it may be said that she does live there. She's a great teacher and a great inspiration to me and to many others around the world. And Dhammadina has had a long-standing connection with Milarepa. And she's done a number of series of talks on him. There's 3 in particular where she speaks about his life. If I have this on the screen for you, I have a shortened URL for you, which you could have gone to download. If you want it, you can come and get it from me later. So just very briefly, he lived in the 11th century. He was a real person. And due to some difficulties in his life, which I'll go through with you, he actually became a black magician, a sorcerer. And as a result of his actions, he killed a number of people. He became very penitent about what would happen as a result of his actions. And he entered into training with a very profound teacher called Marpa, who basically broke him, if you want to put it, broke his ego, completely broke him through very harsh training. And it was what he needed. He did become enlightened as a result of this very long period of training and personal practice in isolation. Now, he is one of the root teachers of a particular school of Tibetan Buddhism called the Kagyu school. And his name means cotton-clad one. And that basically means for him that he spent his time just wearing a thin sheet of cotton up in the glaciers and the snows of Tibet. I'm seeing grimacing faces, trying to imagining what that would be like. Now this is my favourite picture of him, which is by, if I remember correctly, it's by Andy Weber. It might be by Robert Beer. This is a particular favourite. I'm going to go and unpack some of this. For those who are listening to the recording, I'm literally walking around holding the MacBook, showing people the picture, which feels very old school. So you can see the cotton that he's wearing there, the white cotton. He's nearly always shown with his ear cocked like this. This has a number of different symbols. Everything in Tibetan Buddhism is layered with layers and layers of symbols, like onion rings of symbols. For some, this is him hearing the truth. For some, this is listening to his guru. For some, this is actually not so much around the ear, but around the mouth, because he's most famous for singing. He sung his teachings spontaneously. So it's him calling out, calling the Dharma out to others. He didn't have very much. You can see that in his cave he doesn't have very many things. This particular scroll was one that was sent to him by his teacher when things got really hard and he needed to have a kick to keep him going. And he also had very little provisions. He would go up into the mountains and live there for years with one bag of flour, which he would take on a little tip of a spoon and put in his mouth. And that was what he would eat for one day. He wears this red sash, which isn't some sort of royal regalia. You'll see a bit later in one of the other pictures, which I will pass around, that it's a meditation sash. And what it's designed to do is you sort of put your limbs inside it to keep you in a meditation posture even when you don't want to be. So it's to keep you meditating. It's a symbol of perseverance. Yeah. And I won't go into what the kapala or the skull cap is. That's just a little bit beyond our purview today. And he lived on nettles when he ran out of flour. So these strange-looking plants that you see there, they're a kind of a natural nettle that grew outside many of the places where he would live. And he would just make soup out of it. And the black antelope or deer that he's sitting on is another rich symbol that refers to the fact that deer and antelope never sleep in the same place twice. And so that's a symbol of him not owning a place, not having a set place of his own, because he didn't live anywhere in particular, he just kept moving. Now, one of the most significant texts I've ever found about Milarepa I found in all places in Midwest America. Out in the not the cornfields, they don't have cornfields in Indiana, but in Indiana there is the largest collection of Tibetan woodblock prints outside of Tibet, would you believe, in a Midwest American college town called Bloomington. And the reason for that is the Dalai Lama's brother moved to Indiana and set up a centre, and many of those pieces were given to the university for safekeeping. So I went there on a research fellowship unrelated to Buddhism and was just completely blown away by what was available there to look at. And a particular book I came across was a collection of contemporary paintings by an artist, sorry, I can't remember his name, I'll put it in the notes. And what he did was tell Milarepa's story with contemporary materials, but using traditional artwork styles. I'm just going to quickly go through the key aspects of his life, and then we're going to get into the story, and we're going to read the story and work through that. I'm going to have to show the pictures, you see. Thanks, Nagashiri. So, in essence, and it's going to be hard to see, but in essence, when he was a young boy, Milarepa grew up in I wouldn't say too affluent a house, but he was very well prepared, very well cared for by his mother and father, and he had a sister as well. Now, they lived a very simple life. They had farms, which they would look after, and it was very, very happy. However, his father took ill, and his father, unfortunately, died. Now, he left provisions for his children. On his deathbed, he left provisions for his children. And what was to happen was that until he came of age, the affairs of the family would be cared for by his aunt and uncle, Milarepa's aunt and uncle, who were very, very promising of their care and said, yes, we will do everything for the family. We will make every effort to care for them when you pass. They did not live up to their promises. In fact, they put the family into slavery. So Milarepa's mother, his sister and Milarepa himself were basically made into slaves. They were hardly fed, they were hardly clothed, they worked the farms on behalf of the aunt and uncle, and the aunt and uncle took the benefit of their work for themselves. They were beaten, they were attacked, they were vilified in the village, they were treated abominably by them. And of course, being a strong woman, Milarepa's mother said there's only one thing you can do. Revenge. Yeah? So she decided that she would use whatever funds she had to train Milarepa in the art of black magic, well, she didn't personally train him, but she sent him to someone who could train you in black magic. And in Tibet at that time, that was a major, rather lucrative business, to get hailstones to destroy crops, to poison people you didn't like anymore. It was quite a big thing at the time. And so, being a good boy, he did what his mother told him, as many of us do. And he was sent off, and he learned the dark arts. And he makes him sound like he went to Hogwarts or something, but he did terrible things. He eventually trained enough that he could summon hail and create terrifying illusions that would destroy his enemies. And he, on a particular feast day, he destroyed a house. And in that house was his aunt and uncle, and his aunt and uncle's family. I think there's a particularly good picture of that here. Yeah. So in this picture here, the house, the foundations are torn down. All the animals lived under the house in those days. They kept the house warm by having all the stables underneath the house. The animals panicked. They broke the supports for the house. The house came crashing down. And everyone in the house was killed. Except the aunt and uncle. It's very Shakespearean, don't you think?
Were the animals all killed too?
Sadly, they were. Now, it's at this point, I don't know if you are thinking about this story in a kind of allegorical way. That's how I always like to think of this story, because, you know, this could just be a fun fairy tale set in Tibet. I like to sort of map this story onto my life and the lives of people I know, but I tend to focus mainly on myself in this case. I think about the things that I have done that have caused harm to others, and I don't know about you, but I get racked with guilt. Well, he was racked with guilt because he realised that he'd killed over 30 people. What was going to happen to him in his next life? What was going to happen to him next week? He was so racked with guilt that he decided he needed to find the Dharma. He needed to find a Buddhist teacher who would help him deal with this. He needed to find practices that would help him transform that guilt and that anger into something that was more pure. And so he was sent off. He went to a number of teachers, learned one thing after another, a bit like the Buddha actually, who'd learned from one teacher after another. And eventually he heard about this man called Marpa. Now Marpa is quite a terrific figure in Tibetan Buddhism. Big, sort of solid man with a sort of red face because he was often very forceful. And he knew that Milarepa would be a great teacher and a great Buddhist practitioner, but he knew that he had to purge him of his guilt and his actions. Milarepa was forced, if you will. He had a choice. You're either going to get Dharma teaching or you can get food and lodgings. And he made a choice that he wanted the Dharma teachings. And so the Dharma teachings he got were manual labour for years. Building towers, tearing them down again. Building towers, tearing them down again. Building towers, tearing them down again, and never receiving any teaching. I don't know about you, but if I'd come here to the centre and knocked on the door and said, "Oh, excuse me, can I learn the mindfulness of breathing?" They said, "Yes, go clean the bathroom first." And then they said, "Can you do the floors? Oh, and then can you go and do the shopping at Vijayaloka?" You know, for years after years after years, you'd probably go down the road to Sogyal Rinpoche. Anyway, we need to get on to the story. So this is the chunk of the tale that I really want to focus on. And I've got copies of the part of the story to hand out to you all so you can have a look. This actually comes from it's the very first song in this collection, which is called the 100,000 Songs of Milarepa. There are not 100,000 songs. 100,000 just means a lot. Okay? And the song is called The Tale of Red Rock Jewel Valley. So I'm just going to pass these around to you, and there are some images to go with it. The reason we're looking at this song is because I think it's a very practical song to help us understand how to work with those negative things that occur for us. Okay, everyone got one? There's a start here part to look at. So we'll just have a look through this section. This just is after an amusing part of this story where he's gone outside the cave and he loses his robe and it flies up in a tree, and he gets all despondent and he calls to his teacher in his heart and his mind to get support. We don't need to go into that part of the story here, but this is where he comes back inside to a cave. I'm just going to read this little part out here. Exalted, Milarepa adjusted his robe and carried a handful of wood back to his cave. Inside, he was startled to find 5 Indian demons with eyes as large as saucers. One was sitting on his bed and preaching. 2 were listening to the sermon. Another was preparing and offering food. And the last was studying Milarepa's books. Now, for those of you who are sort of pragmatists who live in a sort of modern world, you're already probably thinking we're moving into the land of Lord of the Rings and fantasy and all those sorts of things. And again, I want to remind you that the texts like this are highly coded stories. They're highly layered stories of understanding that you can read on an amusing narrative level of Milarepa walks into a cave and finds some demons. Isn't that entertaining? There are other ways we can go into it, and I want to try and unpack some of those layers with you today, hopefully in a practical and useful way. Okay, so when looking at this song, I went to a number of sources for advice, and I went to Sangharakshita, who wrote this great book, I highly recommend it, called The Yogi's Joy. He talks quite a lot about this song, and he takes an unusual focus, one that I hadn't considered to do with this song, which I think has a lot of pertinence to today, and particularly in Australia. He talks about places such as this, where Milarepa's gone to, which is way up in the mountains in a distant cave, far away from anybody else. There is nothing man-made around there, it's just nature. Sangharakshita talks about the fact that we living in modern urban environments often feel very disconnected from the spirit of place. And by spirit of place, we might feel a sense of mood or a sense of a certain quality of experience in certain places around the world. Have you been to places where you feel there is something more than what you're seeing? You've been to places where you feel there is something else there? Getting some nods, so that's suggesting that maybe you do. Well, he talks about the idea of deities existing in places. He talks about deities being the power of a particular area, literally the spirit of place in a kind of personalised form. And it's not just some mental response to the place, it's a perceptible presence. Does anyone have any kind of place where they've felt a perceptible presence of something other, something slightly more refined, or something that doesn't seem to be purely physical? Does anyone have any experience of that?
I grew up on a farm in the country.
You grew up on a farm in the country?
And
Yep.
originally
I'm moving over because I'm
Yeah.
recording.
Okay, my forefathers came out as convicts,
Mm-hmm.
and they got the land where that farm was through land grants after they finished their term of imprisonment.
Oh, right.
And so there's been sort of continual occupation by the same family until just recently when we sold it. And I think there, for myself and my other siblings, we've all got a very strong connection to the place, but especially for my dad too, and my mum.
Mm.
So it's sort of, yeah. So I think there's something more there than just now, and there's something to do with our previous connection to the place, I think.
I hear about that. I hear you say that as a kind of collection of experience over the family, over time, sort of built up in the space.
Yeah,
Imagine what that must be for the Indigenous Australians.
that's right, and I think it's a very similar thing, that connection to country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else have experiences of that? Okay. So Milarepa is in a space where he encounters the spirit of place, where he's been living. He's been living in this hole, and he's never encountered them before. And for the first time, for whatever reason that might be, he encounters that spirit of place. And he engages in a few responses to that spirit of place. But first, let's unpack about the cave. Caves feature a lot in world mythology and feature a lot in psychology, particularly the work of Jung. So caves are in some ways symbolic of the unconscious. They're that dark place of the unknown. It's a place inside where anything can happen. In some traditions, the cave is both a womb and a tomb. If you think about in the Christian tradition, the cave that Christ is put into is both his womb and his tomb, the womb of his rebirth, or the resurrection, and also the death, the place where the body is placed. Caves are where treasure can be found, and caves were where original ritual magicians used to do their work in the early sort of shamanical places. So the idea of Milarepa going into the cave and coming across these dark forces always reminds me of that idea of going within and encountering things. Did you have a question, Bart?
What did you say about the shaman?
Early shamanic traditions used to do practices in caves themselves. Some of the earliest known artworks, of course, are works of shamanic practitioners and artists working in dark caves where ritual magic would be taking place. So, Milarepa is in a cave and he comes across these demons. Now, demons from the Greek, of course, comes from the word daemon, which means divine power or a guiding spirit, not the kind of nasty demons that we tend to think of in the Christian tradition. So they're kind of energies and spirits that can be creative, they can also be destructive. Yeah. Now, you have a choice when you encounter a demon, and I think we're going to go through what his choices were. What were the choices he made, and what were the fruits of those choices? If we think about this story in a more Jungian sense, which I think I find really useful, this encounter with his demons is encountering aspects of himself that he had not fully met before, that may have been hidden in the dark of the cave, but only through practice was he able to meet and see. These may have been things that he had suppressed within himself, even though he was an established Dharma practitioner and had been doing so for years. That reminds me that just when I think I've got it, there may be still things lurking in the corners that need to be looked at, and not to rest on my laurels. So, he's meeting what they call in the Jungian terms his shadow in these figures. Okay, so let's come back to the story. One's in bed, preaching. Two are listening on. One's making food offerings, which is quite a strong tradition. I don't know if you're aware of this, but one of the reasons we have all these bowls on the shrine is to represent the offerings that we would make to a guest if we were... It's a continuation of the Indian tradition of making offerings to a guest when they come to the house. And that's become ritualised as an action of giving to the Buddha or giving to other figures what you would want them to have as a guest in your life and in your house. And one of them is studying Dharma books. Now, this is what Milarepa does. Following his initial shock, Milarepa thought, these must be magical apparitions of the local deities who dislike me. Those spirits of place we spoke of. Although I have been living here a long time, I have never given them any offering or compliment. He then began to sing a complimentary song to the deities of Red Rock Jewel Valley. This lonely spot where stands my hut is a place pleasing to the Buddhas, a place where accomplished beings dwell, a refuge where I dwell alone. Above Red Rock Jewel Valley, white clouds are gliding. Below, the Sang River gently flows. Wild vultures wheel between. Bees are humming among the flowers, intoxicated by their fragrance. In the trees, birds swoop and dart, filling the air with their song. In Red Rock Jewel Valley, young sparrows learn to fly. Monkeys love to leap and swing, and beasts to run and race, while I practice the two Bodhi minds and love to meditate. You local demons, ghosts and gods, all friends of Milarepa, drink the nectar of kindness and compassion, then return to your abodes. This reminds me of the welcome to country. And it is a quality of appreciation and acknowledgement. You are here. I respect the beauty that you bring to this land. I respect the qualities that you have. However, it doesn't work. But the Indian demons did not vanish and stared balefully at Milarepa. Two of them advanced, one grimacing and biting his lower lip, and the other grinding his teeth horribly. A third coming up behind gave a violent, malicious laugh and shouted loudly as they all tried to frighten Milarepa with fearful grimaces and gestures. So, has anyone sat in meditation and had something difficult come up and you bear it in attention, you acknowledge it, you sit and you look at that painful thing that's arising and it doesn't go away? It doesn't want to run and hide just because you're oh so Buddhist and were very mindful of it. Oh, I'm so mindful of you, my craving. Oh, I'm so mindful of you, my desire. Oh, I'm so mindful of you, my anger and frustration. Sometimes mindfulness is not enough, particularly if you're doing it to get rid of something, because there is no kindness in that form of mindfulness. It is a mindfulness that is actually suppressing and forcing down. It's saying, I do not want this. I see you, but I do not want you. Okay. So we move on to the next thing you try. Well, that didn't work. I acknowledged your presence. I appreciated what you have done. I have seen you. That didn't work. So we try something else. Milarepa, knowing their evil motives, began the wrathful Buddha meditation. I'd love to know what that is, actually. It sounds awesome. It sounds like something Shaolin monks do. Wrathful Buddha meditation. And recited forcefully a powerful incantation. So in this case, it's suppression. So we've tried appreciation and we moved on to suppression. So that's, of course, one of the 5 antidotes to things that arise in meditation. When you've tried all the other things, there's nothing you can do. Well, actually, not the last one. The last one's going for refuge. The second last one is suppression, where you forcibly stop it. It's like, okay, you can't stop thinking of, in my case, Jake Gyllenhaal, right? You can't stop thinking of Jake Gyllenhaal. And so you're sitting in meditation and that just keeps coming up for you all the time. And so you have to go, no, no more, stop. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it works. It doesn't work for him. Because it says there, still the demons would not leave. Then, with great compassion, he preached the Dharma to them. So then he tried the other tack. We've tried appreciation, we've tried suppression, so he tries compassion. He opens his heart. He tries to see the pain in them. There they are, gnashing their teeth, grinding their teeth, advancing towards him aggressively. He tries compassion. They must be in pain. They must be suffering. It must be terrible. Yet still they remained. There's something not working here. Because we can sit, we can be mindful, we can have strength, we can have that sense of ethical sensitivity to suppress those things that we know will cause harm. We can do that. And we can have compassion. We can see the pain in others. We can see the pain in these sensations. We can see the pain in these negative things that can arise within us. But even that's not enough. Milarepa finally declared, Through the mercy of Marpa, I have already fully realised that all beings and all phenomena are of one's own mind. All phenomena are of one's own mind. The mind itself is a transparency of voidness. What, therefore, is the use of all this? And how foolish I am to try to dispel these manifestations physically. And then he sang to them again. I just want to speak a little, before we go on, a little more about this idea of suppression, because I think one of the things that we can do is, as Buddhists, we can spend a lot of our Buddhist practice trying to avoid things we don't like. Because we may have a view that being a Buddhist means that we're always going to be happy, peaceful, calm, that life will continue to be beautiful. But there can be a lot of self-deception here, and there can be a subtle kind of fix-it energy at work. Now, what I mean by that is that we are not happy to be with what is present in our experience. We want something other than what we have got. We want peace. We don't want to be craving stuff. We want what we think every other Buddhist has, but we're not good enough to have. We spend a lot of our time imagining what the perfect life would be and why we don't have it. And so we may practice in a way that pushes ourselves down and subtly stops us from actually seeing what these demons have to teach us. We can have an idealised image of what it means to be a spiritual person. And when we find ourselves meeting stuff that doesn't appear spiritual, that can undermine our faith, and it cannot develop confidence in ourselves and in our practice. Okay, so we tried appreciation, suppression, compassion, and there was one thing left. Okay. We won't read through the whole song. I'll let you take that away to read through it in your own way. But I will come to the two last stanzas in the song. Ye ghosts and demons, enemies of the Dharma, I welcome you today. It is my pleasure to receive you. I pray you stay, do not hasten to leave. We will discourse and play together. Although you would be gone, stay the night. We will pit the black against the white Dharma and see who plays the best. Before you came, you vowed to afflict me. Shame and disgrace would follow if you return with this vow unfulfilled. He arose with confidence and rushed straight at the demons in the cave. Frightened, they shrank back, rolling their eyes in despair and trembled violently. Then, swirling together like a whirlpool, they all merged into one and vanished. So he didn't fight them. He gave in to them, in a way. Not gave in, that's the wrong term. He opened up to them and realised they were part of himself. He integrated them. He integrated the energies and the force behind them. I suppose the question we have to ask ourselves is, when we go in our own cave and we make choices, do we make the similar choices that Milarepa makes? Do we try and fight what's there? Do we appreciate what's there? Are we mindful of what's there in the first place? Do we, in fact, acknowledge that these things are, in fact, part of ourselves? And they're there because they've got something that they need to teach us? Or are we just there slowly trying to cut things out of ourselves that we don't want? Are we trying to almost vivisect ourselves? Oh, I don't like that bit, that's not very Buddhist. Is that what we're doing? Are we actually engaging in anti-compassion in our own practice by not bearing in mind that all of that stuff is built up there and we just need to see it? Okay. In any of the books on this song that I've come across, they never address what the demons were doing. Sangharakshita doesn't address what the demons were doing in the bed, what they were doing in the cave, but I think it really bears giving some attention to. One was preaching, two were listening, one was making offerings, and one was reading books. That idea of him being in bed is indicative of being asleep and unaware. And then preaching is that concept of being able just to ape and say the things that you've been told. It's a kind of imitation, an unaware imitation. Just going through the motions, mouthing the words. And to be just listening is just to be passive. There's no activity present in that. The making the food offerings is a very ostentatious and external practice. You know, how often do we practice in such a way that we're just being seen to be doing something? Is there integrity in the actions themselves? And do we just read the books but not actually live the meaning? The demons could actually be living within our Dharma practice if we don't look very closely at what is the intent and the motive behind them. And there's another layer. And this is colourful. Milarepa actually goes through the whole three layers, three iterations of Dharma teaching in this song. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, there's been three major movements in Buddhism since it began all the way through up to the present day. The earliest form of Buddhism was very poorly named Hinayana, probably called Nikaya Buddhism these days rather than Hinayana. And that's the early Buddhism of the Buddha's time. And it has a very strong emphasis on mindfulness and metta and working with the mind, working with the hindrances and such that arise. And it's very much a practice around self and other. How do I work on self? How do I work with other? Yeah. And that's these two qualities of appreciation and suppression. So we are mindful, we see, and we make ethical choices to avoid the unskillful and to cultivate the skillful. Compassion is really highlighted in the Mahayana tradition, and this is self working for other, self for other, and acting for the good of others, developing a way to help others become enlightened. Very much an other-focused, altruistic focus. And lastly, the Vajrayana, or the diamond vehicle, is self is other, other is self. That all that we see outside is a projection of self. And it's about transforming energies rather than destroying them in a way. So in that song, Milarepa is drawing on the whole Buddhist tradition to work out how can he fully come to understand all parts of himself and put them to the service of his Dharma practice. There's no judgment here about one being better than the other, in case you're wondering that there's a kind of judgment that this is worse than this one, that the top is worse than the bottom here. But there is a sense that we all go through these processes all the time. There'll be some things that we can use mindfulness to let go. Maybe they're the demons with eyes like 50-cent pieces rather than eyes like saucers. There'll be times when compassion is what is required to resolve that which is unresolved within us. But there will be times when you just have to run at that pain and say, teach me, teach me. What must I know? Why are you here? Let me understand you. So Milarepa's story here is one that we all face when you sit and you meditate. When you all go into the cave of your mind and you make choices when you meditate. And I'm wondering what have been some of the fruits of those choices. What I'd like to do in the time that we have left is certainly take any questions. But then I'd actually like us to have some time to think about these responses to these personally and possibly even meet with someone else and that maybe you feel comfortable talking about in very general terms. We don't need to go into our deepest, darkest, traumas and secrets. But wondering, have you made choices that have made things better, as Milarepa did with the things that arose for him? Have you tried some of these strategies that have not proven useful, but have they led you towards something that has been useful? So that's a bit of a whirlwind tour through the song. Do you have a question?
I do. Rather than just thinking about it in terms of meditation,
Yep.
I often think of the cave as perhaps a dark place, or it could be a difficult place. It could
Certainly.
be where, it could be something off the meditation cushion.
Sure.
It could be some kind of ethical dilemma, or you're faced with a difficult decision, or
Mhm.
there's something external bad that's happening to you. So it's kind of, when you enter the cave, you're dealing with that difficult situation. So the choices you make, maybe the ethical choices you make, the decisions you make, how you respond to the difficult situation, could be, yeah, so that could be, you're still making choices in that cave. So I mean, just to kind of look at it as away from meditation,
Sure.
but also in the kind of practical action.
Well, very much. That's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean,
Because you still make choices, and those choices have rules.
correct.
When I saw the cave, I was thinking more of the size of the cave. My cave in the past was very small. So in a way, when you look at it, but by expanding the cave, then it actually gives you a broader environment. So the cave by itself can be limiting, but it can actually be quite broad. If that makes sense.
Can you help me understand that a bit more?
Yeah, so in a way, if you're brought up in a way where you have a very limited experience in a very limited world, then in your mind you have a relatively small cave because you don't know what you don't know, so to speak. But as you experience things, then the cave actually becomes less threatening, and the cave can actually be quite enjoyable, even if it is a cave, because it's a wider frame. Does that make sense?
I've got an image
It
of...
doesn't make sense in my cave.
No, it makes sense in your cave. I've got an image in my mind of, people with hard hats spelunking, exploring, with curiosity rather than with terror, as you say. So, that idea of moving inside the mind and exploring it, seeing its boundaries, being less limiting. Yeah, that's a really creative way to work with that symbol as a cave. And whether that's in meditation or whether that's actually in your life in general, as Stephen was suggesting, I think that's a really valuable way. Yeah. Anyone have any other questions about the song particularly, or about what I've presented?
Sorry, I'm just wondering, those kind of different approaches you set out
Yeah.
for looking at these issues. Do you feel that they're, or do you feel that this is, he's not saying the last one is always the thing you do?
No, he's not.
So you're kind of trying different things.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, there are some parts of yourself that you do need to meet. I mean, I can speak personally that I've practiced for a while now, a number of years. I've been a Buddhist, and when I was on the ordination retreat last year for 4 months, there was an aspect of my character that I had never had the opportunity to fully meet. And it arose in meditation and was with me in my waking hours. And for me, it was a force that had been in my life and had been shaping my actions, both my mental actions and my external actions. It had been shaping them, and I had never fully seen it before. So it was me face to face with this demon with saucer eyes. And I had to engage in a long process of coming to meet and understand, and I tried the techniques. I was reading this song on over and over again during that retreat because I wanted to understand. Firstly, I wanted to get rid of it because it was horrible. I didn't want to be on this wonderful retreat feeling all this pain. Go away. But then I realised that there was no other option in this case. I had to engage in that last stage of integration. Whereas other aspects of my character have been resolved simply through metta, or through just being aware of them. So there isn't a suggestion there's a hierarchy here. Yeah. But did you have a question?
Oh, no, not really. I was just wondering what ended up happening to Milarepa, his story to finish.
His own story.
Yeah.
Well, he went on to wander through Tibet and Nepal for decades, teaching. He had a great number of disciples, both male and female. lay, and a lot of his followers were actually lay, not monks or nuns. He also taught other gods and spirits as well. He became enlightened and began a whole lineage of practice that continues to this day. If you've ever heard of someone called the Karmapa, for example, the Karmapa is the kind of, if you will, the head of the Kagyu school, in the same way that the Dalai Lama is the head of the Gelugpa school, if that makes sense to you. There's 4 main schools in Tibetan Buddhism.
Right. He was the head.
Well, he would never have regarded himself as a head because he never wanted monasteries. He didn't want libraries. He just walked. He went from one place to another. He was not interested. He was offered it multiple times. People would say, get married, because often lamas would get married. Get married, have a monastery, have all this. No, wasn't going to have a bar of it.
What age did this guy?
Lived to his 80.
I mean, like, year.
Oh, in the 11th century. So he died in 1135. Actually, that makes it the 12th century. Yeah, but most of his life was in the 11th century. Yeah. Nagashuri, did you want to add anything?
No, not at all.
Okay. All right, so let's spend a bit of time. The purpose behind this questioning isn't, I should make this clear. I would hope that what we're about to do if we pair up is not to whip ourselves. You're laughing. Oh, I'm so bad. I'm such a bad meditator. I make really bad choices in my life. It's not about that. Because every little moment of you finding yourself distracted, every little moment of you thinking about something that you may not think of spiritual, it's that moment of arresting the attention and seeing it. That is something to be celebrated. That is actually you welcoming the demon, meeting the demon. So, we don't have to think of this as, I've had this major problem, blockage in my life, and I'm still there and I just can't work with it. Just constant kindness, constant attention, constant coming to know is something to be rewarded and something to be celebrated. So the opportunity here is to meet with someone that you know and share some of this. Share some of your successes. Share some of the things that you have met and worked with. Some of the strategies that you found helpful. Not to dwell on the negatives. So I will allow you to move where you need to go. If you're happy to do this, of course. Yeah? It's a celebration of what you have achieved. And that's okay.
I don't think I understand the exercise, sorry.
Don't understand the exercise? Very dramatic not understanding of the exercise. I want you to meet with someone and talk about when you sit and when you meditate, what goes on, how do you work with it, and what's something positive that can arise when you work with it well. That's basically the essence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So, thank you for your patient attention. We'll reconvene in about 10 minutes. Okay. So please find someone that you feel comfortable talking to.